I realize full well how volatile this entire situation is. I further realize that there may indeed be a significant number of people in this community who may disagree with what I'm about to say. But in my opinion, what's right is right. And I am here today because I believe an injustice was done yesterday in the firing of Officer Christopher Manney. And I cannot stand by and allow that to occur without further comment. The shooting in Red Arrow Park was undoubtedly a tragedy, every which way you look at it. But one does not address a tragedy or attempt to alleviate the pains of one tragedy by creating another. And yet, sadly, that is precisely what occurred yesterday afternoon. The firing of Officer Manney was, in my opinion, ill-conceived, unwarranted, and politically motivated. I have had the opportunity to spend some time with Chris Manney, and I've gotten to know him. And I find him not only to be a good officer, but a good human being. You ought to read some of the letters that came his way from people on his beat. I can assure you of this. He didn't wake up that morning in April and decide who he was going to shoot that day. Sadly, in my opinion, he has become the scapegoat for the racially charged political environment we live in. It's my understanding that Chief Flynn fired Officer Manney without even talking to him, without even getting his side of the story one-on-one. We're not talking here about a part-time paper route. We're talking about a man's career, about a man's vocation, and how you can fire someone without first looking that person in the eye and telling him the reasons for your firing is beyond me. In addition, even if Officer Manney was guilty of these two rule violations, punishment in the past in similar circumstances never rose to the level of termination. The chief willingly admitted that the use of force was justified given the circumstances. However, he also indicated that Officer Manney made assumptions that Dontre Hamilton was mentally ill and homeless. Well, all I can tell you is this. If Officer Manney did make that assumption, I'm sure it was based on his experience working downtown, where sadly there are a large number of individuals living in those tragic circumstances. As for not patting down a homeless person, and I am using the chief's terminology when I refer to him as a homeless person, it would be poor policing not to do so. Just ask any good cop and they'll tell you that it is not at all uncommon to find some type of weapon on a homeless individual. That's the sad reality. Let's face it, they live on the streets 24/7, and our streets are violent. I am very concerned about how this decision will impact the already incredibly low morale of our officers. I fear that an increasing number of officers will put their blinders on and do the absolute minimum, fearful that any difficult decision made on the streets will come back to haunt them and be second-guessed by armchair command staffers and Monday morning quarterbacks.
We all are affected by the loss of life. The family of Dontre and certainly that of our officer, all grieve from this unfortunate occurrence. We have compassion for all. However, Dontre forced this situation, not the other way around. Not the other way around. The leadership of this city has failed the citizens of this community by not communicating this properly. The chief's message of support, non-support, will leave us all floundering. His continued efforts towards non-policing and failed attempts at questionable policing strategies, and the fact that his political concerns outweigh his public safety concerns, are rapidly breeding no confidence. How's the officer doing was the question.
About time.
The officer is getting by. Every day is a challenge. He is a good man raising his children, and without the support of his brothers and sisters, I don't know where he would be. Every day is different. I talked to him last night. He said, sometimes I'm 3 steps forward and 5 steps backwards, and I'm not gaining ground. So by you bringing that statement up, it puts it in everybody's mind to think about Chris, to remember Chris when you bend your knee tonight. I think that's the best way I can answer it. He's getting by.